Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Fang, a classic mecha shoot 'em up from Data East. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Originally released in arcades in 1991, Fang, or as it was known in the West, Rohga Armor Force, was ported to the PlayStation in 1996 by the company Xene, and that's the version we're looking at today. So the PlayStation version added some Red Book audio as well as changing up some of the graphics and adding voice. But even in this version you can go and have it be more like the original arcade, though it's not quite the same. Alright! So as we start the game, we're taken to one of the most awesome elements of this game itself. The construction screen. So here we can choose our mech. We can either pick type A, B, C, or D, or we can go and pick our own. There are 3 elements with 4 each for a total of 64 possible combinations. So you've got your sub-weapon, the homing missile, the electricer, the flame shot, or flame storm, and the grenade launcher. We'll take the homing missile, then you've got your melee attack. The knuckle shot, the beam sword, the iron claw, and the pile bunker. Mech's gotta be beam sword, totally classic. And then last you have your movement. You can have 2 legs, 4 legs, hover, or even wheels. And it lists here how the mobility is affected. So some of them have lower jump, some have higher jump, but then your speed is affected one way or another. And we'll take the hover. So there are 64 total combinations, and each one of those 64 is a certain type that they gave a name to. So this type that we created is the Type 9, the Yukikaze. That's one of the things I love, is the fact that they actually took the time to name each of those. So here's one of the things that's different between the arcade version and the PlayStation version. So the PlayStation version would have different character portraits for these characters, as well as voice acting for them, which unfortunately is not skippable, so that's part of the reason why we are playing the arcade version. This is just a little faster to go and show you the game itself. So we start our mission. It's basically the story of this game is these terrorists have invaded and taken over Australia or Oceania, and we're this experimental mech force that's out to save them. So what do we have here for a base? Well, we have a traditional horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up, but with a couple different twists. It's more like a run and gun because the mech itself does not fly, so you're restricted to the ground itself. And the ability to jump is of course determined by your mobility. If you picked wheels, you won't be able to jump very high at all. The 2 legs, not the same. And then you've got higher mobility with the hover and quite a bit of mobility with the 4 leg, but it's just, slower. So as far as other mechanics are concerned, so we picked our sub-weapon, and that's our charge meter at the top. It has several levels of charge. The more the charge, the better the power. I just fired it off even though it didn't really do anything. We also have a main shot where we start with the Vulcan cannon. It's possible to pick up 3 other weapons. There's also the cluster, which is kind of a rolling shotgun. Grenade, which I personally don't like at all, it's just hard to aim, and the laser beam, which I just picked up. There are also several other pickups that we can get as well. So there's life pickup, power pickup to give your shot more power. I believe there's 3 or 4 levels, I'm not actually 100% sure on that. Power up to give you a full charge. And they're also Defense Force members. So there'll be these guys on jetpacks flying around, and if you pick them up, they'll ride on your mech until you take damage. Basically covering your blind spots. One thing I'm not a fan of is you don't have the ability to turn around and shoot behind you while you're actively shooting your weapon. You have to stop firing to be able to turn around and shoot. So the Defense Force members will cover your blind spots. So let's see if I can actually get one. Here's one. Alright! So one thing that's really neat, if you get to a section where there's a background wall, you can actually grind on that, which makes it feel like a far more open shoot 'em up that way. It's something that's really neat. So the game itself has an interesting branching story mechanic as well, and I'll get to that as soon as we finish up this stage. I haven't discussed the life system as well. So you have energy or life with your mech that, depending on what difficulty levels you set, will start out at a certain number. The longer... Alright, a couple Defense Force members. Anyway, the more damage you take, of course, like the closer you are to death. But even if you hit low life, you're not completely done. Your pilot will eject from the mech will blow up, destroying any enemies on screen, or rather, at least dealing heavy damage to them. And you'll have the ability to fight still, just as your pilot. One hit will kill you, but if you can stay alive long enough to collect 3 power-ups, it doesn't matter which 3, you'll restore your mech and be back in action, though with low life, so there is that caveat. Pretty awesome seeing those enemies jump over the barriers as well. Let's go with the cluster. Maybe. No, wasn't quite able to change the weapons as well as I was like to do. So the Defense Force members are knocked off anytime you're hit. Depending on your mech construction, you'll only be able to hold a couple Defense Force members, up to 4, I believe, is the maximum if you take either the 4-leg or the 6-wheel. Oh, sweet. Let's see if we can change to the cluster gun. So this is the cluster shotgun. So here we're encountering the boss of Stage 2. We're given a quick heads up as to its weakness, which is the engine in the middle. We'll see if we can't get in there. And oh no! So our mech has now been destroyed, so we're going around as just our... Oh. We were just going around as our pilot. So, now that we've gotten that far, I'm going to take a quick second to go with something a little bit different. So we're going to take the Flamestorm, we're going to go with the Pile Bunker, and we're going to do the 4-leg, just so we can see a different mech. And this is the Type 45, the Rohga. So basically Dragon King. Awesome name. And that's the Flamestorm there. So it basically fires these flame pillars into the air, which will then rain down on the enemies, dealing a pretty hefty amount of damage. With the power of our melee weapon, the Pile Bunker, the boss of Stage 2 is done. Clear bonus! So now here we get to the part where we've got branching paths. So in our debriefing here, we'll get to select our stage. And there are a couple different difficulty ranks depending on which stage you select. So here we can choose to continue to defend and try and liberate Australia, or we can liberate New Zealand instead, which is the easier one. And we'll go that direction. And that will lock us into a particular path, and then we'll have another branching path towards the end. One of the things that's really neat about this system is it allows for a total of 4 different endings that you can get. And that's one thing that was missing from the Western arcade port. The cutscenes were largely reduced. You didn't have the names for all your mechs, and the stages were linear. They took out the stage select, so you just played through the 12 total stages all in a row without the option to have multiple endings. Kind of disappointing when you would think of how much that could add to the game itself. And that, in a nutshell, is Fang. So, as far as like minus flavors are concerned, I don't have a whole lot. The ability to turn around and shoot behind you more easily would be something I would appreciate. But as is, especially with the Defense Force units, it's bearable the way that it is. There's also something that I would feel would be a huge quality of life improvement. There's no life meter for the bosses, so they can feel awful tanky because you don't know how much damage you've even really dealt to them. Oh no, I've lost my mech. That's alright, kind of planned. So here we're fighting a big enemy mech that kind of looks like a Gundam Dome. I'll select one more setup before we move on. So we'll take the Electricer with the Knuckle and the 2-leg. And this is the Type 50, the Send-In. So this guy defends himself, kind of making him annoying, but once again, it's we have no idea how much damage we've actually done to him, which makes it difficult to know how much more of this battle we have with him. So the plus flavors, though, the mech construction is the true highlight of this game. Being able to construct that many different mechs and basically have your own playstyle was really, really neat. I also love shoot 'em ups that have branching paths and different endings. And that last chance where you can still pull things together even though you've lost your mech, if you're good enough to avoid the shots and collect the power-ups, that's something that I find is really amazing as well. Alright, well, that's Wolf Fang, served up for your enjoyment. Truly a special treat with all sorts of variety. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet where you can make any combination you want. Well, just about. That'll finish up this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. All right!